So last night we covered the Matt Gaetz Venmo story that basically he and Joel Greenberg used a digital cash app type system to send money to girls for quote unquote school and tuition, wink wink, and that we all know what it's for given what Gaetz is being investigated for. And now the first major Republican, Adam Kinzinger, has called on Matt Gaetz to resign. And this is the first domino, because as a lot of people were speculating before this story really blew up, was that Matt Gaetz's accusations, they're so serious that the usual process of how a congressman is treated in these sorts of scenarios might not be followed. I covered it on the channel. Generally, the way it goes is there's not normally calls for resignation until indictment or charges are laid. And usually what happens when a congressman is charged with a crime is that they resign from all their positions of power. So if they hold a committee chair or if they sit on a committee in Congress, they usually step aside from the committee. If they hold some role within their party, like they're a party whip, or they hold some committee chair within the Republican or Democratic Party, they'll step aside from that. They'll keep their elected office, but they will step aside from literally everything else. And usually direct calls for resignation or expulsion really only follow after conviction. But as we're seeing here, some Republicans, many rank and file Republicans, many more moderate Republicans in the media, like people like Meghan McCain, John McCain's daughter, has already called for him to resign. This is the first one in Congress. Now, the question is going to be, how significant is Kinzinger's call for Gaetz to go? I mean, I think Gaetz could go to jail for life. I really honestly believe that. I think he could go to prison for life. But the fact of the matter is, while almost no one in the Republican Party of a big name has come out to actually defend him, very few people have come out directly against him. And it has to be remembered who Kinzinger is. He's not really a moderate guy ideologically. He's actually quite conservative in how he votes on legislation. But one thing he's done for the past few months especially is take clear stands against Trump and Trump-style Republicans. He was one of the 11 or so Republicans in the House to vote for impeachment back in January, and he was one of the people that voted to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee positions after she did terrible thing after terrible thing after terrible thing. And of course, he was one of the people that demanded Donald Trump resign and do all these things when he was still in power. All of these things were something that Kinzinger led with, and it often made him the enemy of the Republican Party mainstream, which included more Trumpian folks. And so maybe the Kinzinger, call for resignation is the first domino, but I wonder if it will have the opposite effect. There's a chance that because Kinzinger is seen as so anti-Trump, now if you were maybe sort of Trump adjacent and you wanted to come out and criticize Gaetz, you're going to look implicitly like you're standing with Kinzinger, who implicitly is standing against Trump. Right? And now Kinzinger's attack on Gaetz can be roped into part of his broader attacks on Marjorie Taylor Greene and on Donald Trump. But I think that if I'm being honest, I'm not a supporter of Kinzinger. I don't support any Republican, and I think most Democrats are far too conservative for my taste. But Kinzinger has the strategy right here. The strategy is correct. You force Gaetz out ASAP. You get rid of him ASAP, because if he resigns or gets expelled or whatever, the story doesn't die necessarily, but you stop being tarred and feathered with it. The Republican Party stops being tarred and feathered with it in the same way. And so if you don't want the Democrats to fundraise off Gaetz and his scandals and to attack you off of it, force him out now. And so Kinzinger is right. Rip the Band-Aid off and get rid of this dude. Yeah, he was a Trump loyalist, but he's been accused of awful things, and the investigation started under Trump. And as I noted on the channel, the political risks are relatively minor, because the fact of the matter is Gaetz's district is a very safe red district, in the Florida Panhandle. If you look at his district, it's basically plus 23 Republican, R plus 23, which basically means in a typical election, he'll beat the Democrat by about 23 points. That's massive. That's more than 60-40. Republicans would almost never ever lose Gaetz's district. So you can turf him, make it look like you give a damn about women's rights and children and legal accountability, and then in a few months there'll be a special election and you'll get another Republican. And in those next few months, there's not likely to be a vote you're going to lose in the House by exactly one, so you don't necessarily need to worry about Gaetz's vote here and now, week to week. You can turf him, replace him, get someone better, maybe get a young woman Republican to run in his district. It'll send a good message. Gaetz needs to go, and I think the moderate Republicans, if anything, are trying to save the ass of their own party. Gaetz is a millstone right now, and if you want a representation of Republican ugliness and hypocrisy, Matt Gaetz is representing it. If you're a smart Republican, you'll ask for him to resign. But what we've seen over the past 4 years is that Republicans would rather be with Trump than be smart.